Well, pretty affecting to see Bunny in action, isn't it? Well, thank you so much for letting me speak, and especially for accommodating what turned into a crazy schedule. So I'm going to have to go. I'm Marcia Greenberger, and I will tell you about a little bit about myself and my connection to Bunny Sandler. In the fall of 1972, I went to one of the early public interest law firms, the Center for Law and Social Policy, based in Washington, D.C. And my job was to start a women's rights project. Well, if you're going to start a women's rights project in 1972, you go talk to Bunny Sandler. That was clear. There were some icons then, and she was way up there at the top of the list. This was just a couple months after Title IX was passed. And in figuring out what would be the areas of focus for this new women's rights project based in Washington, education and Title IX was a no-brainer. I spent a lot of time, and as the National Women's Law Center grew out of that early women's rights project of the Center for Law and Social Policy, and it became the National Women's Law Center in 1981. And I stepped down as the co-president of the National Women's Law Center in 2017, so a year and a half ago. And it is led now by the wonderful Fatima Gosgraves, and the center at this very moment, who is a couple floors up in this building, is very engaged in many fights, of course Title IX, and because, as Sue said, it's the Roe v. Wade anniversary, that is taking up a lot of the energy right today for the center. But I come on behalf of my colleagues and my friends at the center to tell you not only about the history, and I'm the one with the longest history with Bunny, but to reassure you and everyone that the work continues and all of her building blocks are continuing to be used and to build upon and to fight with at the center and with all of you. Now, back to Bunny and the lessons that she taught. One, Women's Equity Action League started, as Sue mentioned. Bunny was a genius in many respects. She was a serious scholar. She believed in mastering the law, the details, the research. She had that extraordinary discipline of mind and hard work that made her the wonderful academic that she was. She was a brilliant strategist. She coupled that hard work, determination, research, and ability with an amazing sense of strategy for social change. So lucky us, her passion was, as we all know, to eliminate sex discrimination, gender discrimination in education and beyond. That led to Title IX and the passage of Title IX, her life's work. I learned about the substance of Title IX. I learned about the strategy of making Title IX work and making all of the laws, whether it's employment discrimination, housing discrimination, credit discrimination, health discrimination, the list goes on. How do you get those laws passed? How do you get the implementing regulations to be strong and issued? How do you litigate in court, both to defend against challenges and to push forward? How do you build a public education campaign? Because underneath every strategy has to be public support. Bunny understood and saw the connections between the issues, the connections between the strategies. You cannot succeed in isolation, and you cannot succeed alone without a huge movement that all of you represent. Bunny also knew to her core that the fight, as she said, may have been bigger, and the discrimination may have been bigger than what she anticipated when it was passed. But over the years, what became clear, and what we see with the Me Too movement and so much more, is that we cannot rest on our laurels. There will be the fight back to save what we want, but also what we want is so deeply ingrained and so much a part of our systems in so many ways that it is truly a multi-generational effort to keep that fight going. And even cynical me has been shocked at the breadth and the depth and the cruelty of harassment and assault and the fight back against women who come forward and girls who come forward as a microcosm of all of the systems that have given women second-class status for so many millennials. So, briefly, I started in the end of '72. I worked on the real case, Women's Equity Action League, learning at Bunny's need. Brought it in 1974 because I had a daughter intervening and pulling it together. Women's Equity Action League was the first plaintiff, and it was a suit against then the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, who refused to issue those Title IX regulations because it turns out we were going to have to take on a lot of sacred cows. And who knew intercollegiate athletics was a part of it? And so we brought that case. That case continued until this new baby was 16 years old. Sued and then we brought contempt of court motions and required enforcement going forward. We sued Clarence Thomas when he was the head of the Office for Civil Rights. We continued and continued and continued. Here's what I want to say in conclusion, and if you want to have a week seminar on all of my own memories, let alone everybody else's of Title IX, I would complain it's not enough time.
It's true.
One, Bonnie was a master, and I know you will talk about Title IX, but I want to add, one of the laws that we included that she pioneered was Executive Order 11246, where she got complaints that were brought before Title IX was passed that applied primarily to higher ed educational institutions that all got federal contract funds and therefore had requirements not only to eliminate sex discrimination in employment for their employment workforce, but to engage in affirmative action to overturn all of those study and then overturn those systems that kept discrimination in place. Those complaints were being ignored. She filed over 100 of them with brave women in academia coming forward, putting their name on the line, and the Department of Education and then the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare and the Department of Labor, both enforcing it, were ignoring those all. And there were incredible women, Verna Whitrock, who I remember going out to her department in Illinois, whose life was made miserable, and it got repeated and repeated. We got a court order requiring not only Title IX be enforced, but the executive order be enforced as well, and it applied against the Department of Labor as well as then HEW. That executive order applied to every federal contractor. Bunny's brilliance was used by the Coal Employment Project in West Virginia to open mines for women because the coal companies got federal contract funds. Women employed in Chicago used Bunny's strategy with the executive order and filed complaints against the major banks and insurance companies that had separate college training programs for women because they couldn't be trained to go into finance and other areas that were for men and for their male clients. They used the executive order and Bunny's strategy. The major industries in this country have all been opened up, not as much as they need to be, because of Bunny Samler. Her impact, her immediate impact, was far, far beyond education. To say nothing of the fact that, of course, when you open up education and you get women, they can move into every area. And then I want to close with saying something about friendship, love, generosity that's already been discussed. Bunny was the most generous person to this young know-nothing who started in 1972 with her time, with her brilliance, with her patience, and that continued over the decades. 2, how lucky I lived not so far from where Bunny lived. So I got to see her when she began to fail and spend some time with her, although I was not able to go to that wonderful play. Although Fatima Goss-Graves, the current president of the National Women's Law Center, was there and had the privilege of spending time with Bunny. Anyway, when I saw Bunny not so long before she died, I was struck by her serenity, her sense of satisfaction, her ability to remember Title IX cases, strategies, the executive order. We had the most rich conversations. And she was not the strong Bunny of old, but this was an extraordinary person with radiance to the end. It is because of Bunny Samler, who understood coalitions, who understood mentoring, that I became a member of the Women's Hall of Fame, because Bunny pushed me and pushed my application, and they so loved her at the Women's Hall of Fame. I had to mention that when I saw that on the video, that whoever Bunny was vouched for was in, and that is true. Anyway, she was unique, and every single person will have much to be proud of to emulate her in any of the wonderful ways that she was such a force for her family, and she talked very often about her family and her girls, and you heard about her grandchildren as well, for her colleagues, for her friends of long-standing and friends of not as long-standing, for those who were knowledgeable, those who were less knowledgeable. So thank you so much.
Thank you.